Hello there, and welcome to the latest edition of the DF Direct Q&A show. And there's certainly a lot to discuss in the wake of the Project Helix. I kind of guess it's kind of an announcement. I don't know. Alex Battaglia joins us for this particular show. Hello.
Yeah, Helix is kind of a PC, maybe. So I'm interested.
And of course, Oliver Mackenzie.
Yes, Rich, I'm very excited to report that my premier David Eby has moved the clocks forward by 1 hour permanently. So I'm permanently 1 hour closer to the both of you.
Wow, amazing. Make the most of it. Looking for a new high-quality gaming display? MSI has a range of excellent options for all budgets across its white monitor range, with selected models at sale prices. On the top-end QD OLED side, there's the MPG 321URXW 4K 32-inch 240Hz with adaptive sync, OLED Care burn-in protection, and that's backed by a 3-year warranty. Also check out more attractively priced screens, including the 4K Mini LED MPG 274URD FW-E16M. And for the budget-conscious gamer looking for the ultra-wide 1440p experience, consider the modern MD342 CQPW VA display. Spring deals are now on. Check the video description below for more details and more deals. Let's crack on first of all with this question from Don't Be a Richard. As always, advice I can fully endorse. But let's get straight onto the question. In the recent Direct, the team discussed the potential that Project Helix could be a device with dual booting. Wouldn't this, however, be too much fiction for end users and go against the direction of Microsoft's recent handheld, which seems to be looking to bring all games, including third-party storefronts, into a single, consistent UI? Xbox already makes heavy use of virtualization for its gaming for both Xbox One and Series generation, as well as being in part what allowed 360 compatibility to be supported. Rather than having a dual booting device, would it not make more sense for Helix to virtualize the current Xbox OS? The underlying Xbox OS could be abstracted away, and not user accessible, limited quote unquote tinkering, and allow MS to still tightly control Xbox games without needing users to jump into another OS. Presumably, if Microsoft's going to dictate the chips that Helix systems could use, they could also fully control all driver/firmware via this virtualized layer and low-level calls to hardware, while leaving the traditional Windows games subject to drivers delivered from NVIDIA/AMD/Intel. I assure you the question will be over shortly. However, we shall continue. It would seem to be a misstep for me if Helix was just a dual booting system, and I hope MS could unify the experience using existing virtualization implementations and use it to provide many of the benefits of traditional consoles for those titles. Lastly, as much as the team hates the Windows Store, it seems that the security Microsoft's wraps around software delivered through it has in the past shown to be capable of preventing the end user tinkering of such apps, for better or worse. Presumably Microsoft can similarly lock down Xbox hypervisors and games. Yes, I think this is going back to the Direct where we said that a possible route forward for Microsoft was to basically have a dual booting device where you have like Xbox OS and traditional Windows. But I kind of understand what Don't Be a Richard is saying here, in that dual booting isn't exactly a friction-free experience. You'd kind of want to unify Xbox and Windows as much as possible, really. But I guess the question, Alex, is how much is possible?
Yeah. So I would argue much is very possible, as if most of the Xbox stuff is dumped, in the aspect of you keep the current level of virtualization for backwards compatibility purposes. And It's brought up through a UI that is recognizable, kind of like it has been done in the past. But the route forward for future Xbox software is basically writing PC games with maybe a tiny bit of extra work, potentially. And the reason why I say that is because I don't think this device is going to be a very high-selling, high-volume device. And the idea of developers, they already don't spend a lot of time sometimes on Xbox Series X and Series S. And we've seen that when we do our side-by-side comparisons of those with like the PlayStation 5 versions of games. And we see like totally bizarre visual issues that just don't show up on PS5, or performance issues that we don't expect that aren't there on PS5. And then they're maybe fixed in patches and whatnot. And we already see them not getting the full level of service there. And a more expensive box that is going to be bought by less people, I don't think there is the, will among publishers to just keep supporting that thing indefinitely when it could just be a great PC port machine. And therefore, I would argue the point of bringing these two together is to essentially give all the benefits of that PC development environment over to people who want to also develop Xbox games. And they just are essentially going to be running PC versions that are going to be sold through the UWA or UWP equivalent thing that's going to be running on the Xbox OS through their store. And then the potential to just play normal .exes through something like Steam or the Epic Games system, or GOG, which is, I believe, also going to support it. So that's the way I see it's going to be. I think it's going to do invisible driver updates, invisible firmware updates, or maybe also make them visible because they do that on SteamOS, right? You can opt into these things. And I think that's the way it's going to be. I think them relying on people developing specific Xbox software for the future just doesn't make sense financially. So I don't think that's the way they're going to do it, actually.
I guess my question on that would be, what happens if you're saying it is just basically Windows, but with like Xbox editions, so to speak? What happens if you've got malware installed on your Windows platform? What happens then? What if you've accidentally left Adobe Premiere on in the background and it sucked up all of your system resources, and then the Xbox OS or the Xbox side of things kicks in? I think you're in danger in that scenario of basically producing a suboptimal experience compared to what you would get on a console. So there's got to be provisions for that, I think. What do you think, Oliver?
Well, I think to me, the key question here is how much of the legacy Xbox software is exposed through some central interface, or is it going to be just like a totally separate partition with a completely separate interface from the user-facing perspective? Right. If it'll be some kind of interface that allows you to hopefully navigate between Xbox Windows Store games and legacy games, all in the Xbox Store, I think that's kind of the question here. But I feel confident, as does Alex, that Helix games will basically be PC games, essentially.
Right. Yeah.
I'm quite confident in that. I also expect that when it comes to like EGS games or Steam games, that you'd basically be dropped into full fat Windows from that point. And then maybe also this Xbox partition will allow you to basically just go into the Xbox Series, go into an Xbox Series mode and enjoy all your Xbox Series games and all that within its own Xbox Series interface instead of some kind of centralized interface. So I actually feel fairly confident that it is going to be this split Windows and then legacy Xbox system. To me, the question is, to what extent can they make that interface work and unify those two interfaces and make it functional? Is that going to be something they're going to be able to accomplish? Or is it going to be kind of like this kludge where you have Xbox full screen experience in one corner and then exit out of that, and now we're into Steam Big Picture mode, which is where I think a lot of people were spending a lot of time on this box, to be honest with you. And then we have this like legacy Xbox Series mode that is really just for like legacy software that gets, decreasing use over time and things like this. So I think fundamentally it is a PC box. And I've seen a lot of consternation and debate over what constitutes a console, and is this a console? Is it not? I'm less interested in that question, but I think centrally this is going to be a PC box that has the functionality of prior Xbox boxes, but that's not going to be the focus. And certainly it's not going to be the focus for ongoing software when you're booting this thing up in like 2032. You're not going into much Xbox Series software, I suspect.
Right. I think you're right. I think there is a certain degree of parity in terms of development for these games. So the PC version is effectively the Xbox version at that point, but I do think it will sit within its own area within that particular machine, and that particular machine will need certain protections for stuff like protecting online multiplayer, for basically protecting the integrity of the Xbox ecosystem, because I think that's the danger of basically giving players a completely open box, is that especially on Windows there's a lot of bad actors out there who need to be frozen out of whatever the Xbox experience is. When it comes to Steam and Epic Game Store or whatever, I guess we are kind of like in here be dragons territory. It's all on your own back if you want to use those other stores. If they do manage to integrate, Steam and EGS into whatever Xbox partition, if you want to call it that, actually happens, that would be quite interesting. Yeah, I guess we're just going to have to see how that all pans out. We do have this talk from Jason Ronald at GDC happening this week, which let's just say I'm very interested to see what he has to say about that, because, surely he's got to answer a lot of these questions, because, certainly from a developer perspective, I think they kind of want to know what the roadmap is for Xbox. And I think developers want that kind of convergence between Xbox and PC in the way you describe, Alex. Just makes life a whole lot easier, right? So how's it all going to work? What are the nuts and bolts there? I'm really, really looking forward to finding out.
Yeah, in my case here, I know that everyone's probably excited for that Jason Ronald talk. I actually am not too interested in it, but there's other talks there that are going to be great that I want to report back on when I get access to the sessions. Right. There's advanced shader delivery on Windows, presented by Microsoft Xbox. And it's also got someone there from Binox, which I find very interesting, which is a PC port studio, and they're very, they're very competent in Binox. Yeah. They've also got evolving DirectX for the ML era on Windows. We're going to finally see a bit of those cooperative vector stuff going on, and even more, I presume. There's going to be Intel, AMD, and NVIDIA people there. DirectX State of the Union 2026, direct storage and beyond. Now, so this one is going to talk about, alongside with shader delivery stuff and RT advancements, new advancements in direct storage on PC, which is very interesting that they're doing that. And I think one of the big reasons why they're doing it is because now Xbox is going to be a PC, and they're going to actually probably be within Windows GPUs and systems that are going to actually start having hardware direct storage support. So not GPU direct storage. So I think this is one of the reasons why they're doing all this stuff. So those are the things I'm very interested in. And I think I'll try and report back to them when we have our next Direct.
Yeah, that would be absolutely fantastic. Interesting stuff. I mean, there's actually, obviously not coincidental, but we are actually seeing a lot of movement now on DirectX 12, where previously it's like nothing seems to have happened for several years.
Yeah, really.
So that's kind of good, I guess. But yeah, I am quite amused by the fact that Jason Ronald is hopefully going to be supplying us a lot of next-gen console details. But Alex Battaglia is not particularly interested.
Unless it really is just like a change of the PC and the Microsoft Xbox is the new PC gaming experience, then I'm obviously less interested.
Okay, then. So let's move on to this question from Bulbous_Bow. Good afternoon, gentlemen! Exclamation point. Project Helix announcement got me thinking. The rumors suggest Helix could be looking at very roughly around 5080 performance plus NPU, and the PS6 around 5070 Ti. Still to be substantiated, of course, but if we at least assume a gap in performance of around that level, I wonder the extent to which the team feel Helix will be able to produce meaningfully better experiences. You can see it easily in DF head-to-heads, but if that's simply on the basis that they both upscale to 4K convincingly, albeit Helix from a higher base resolution, and or Helix locks to 120 while PS6 floats around 100 with VRR enabled, so what? On the other hand, there's got to be a reasonable chance AMD get RDNA 5 up to a point where it can compete with what NVIDIA are offering today and possibly more. So are there any features available today or in the pipeline that you can foresee Helix's more powerful variant truly to take advantage of? Maybe multi-frame gen when plugged into a monitor, perhaps also highlighting the discrepancy in target market. Sorry if that's too many questions in one. I did honestly try this time. Well, here's an interesting thing that I've been thinking about for some time, Alex, which is, let's say you've got like a 5080 and a 5070 Ti. However, you've locked the output frame rate to, say, 60 frames or 120 frames per second on both. And the only difference between them is effectively a more aggressive DLSS factor on the 5070 Ti. My question to you is, to what extent would people actually notice the difference?
I mean, they really, really probably wouldn't.
Yeah.
So this is the conundrum of just everyone buying things from AMD and they all having similar price ranges for their output console. It's just boring because they're producing the same thing with different internal resolutions, which is why it wouldn't be interesting, and I don't think it would be meaningfully better. So the more meaningful thing from my perspective would be if it had different feature sets that the other console wouldn't have. And this applies to both of them. Like one could have something that the other doesn't have. And in this case, Microsoft, I think in the internal leaked documents regarding what this originally was a few years ago, they did mention things like MLFG, and we still have yet to see Project Amethyst touching frame generation. So maybe there will be an emphasis on frame generation more than on the PlayStation side. I don't know. Those are just things that I think that differentiate NVIDIA on PC versus AMD. It's like the software experience. And it would be good if MS leveraged some of that PC software experience to make a more interesting box. I mean, they kind of already do that with you being able to do things like 120 hertz on the dashboard, which is something you don't get on PlayStation side. I think if they lean more into those kind of premium things, then they could have a box that is for the premium user. And kind of like Bulbous Bow here says, you can actually hook it up to any type of monitor. Like they've kind of pushed the HDMI spec higher on Series X than they did on the PlayStation 5. Maybe they'll do the same thing this time around. So they'll actually have like DSC 4K 240 viable there. And hopefully AMD has a good multi-frame gen by that point in time. And then you'd get that really ultra high-end experience that you get on a PC right now on such monitors where you can play up to the refresh rate. So I think that would be an excellent way to do it. Yeah.
I mean, I think that's probably one of the biggest surprises of this particular console generation is that in the end, the on-paper specification difference between PlayStation 5 and Series X didn't meaningfully transform into any kind of appreciable improvement. And part of that, I think, is down to the era of dynamic resolution scaling, where it's very difficult to tell, let's say 1620p apart from 1800p. It's just the way it is, particularly with temporal upscaling in the mix as well. Curious what you make of this, Oliver, because I think you're aware of the various leaks for both the PlayStation 6 and the Xbox. There is a meaningful advantage to what Microsoft is apparently doing. But maybe Alex is right. Maybe it is more the case that, that extra horsepower will be better utilized by like PC enthusiasts as opposed to console players.
Yeah, there is a meaningful advantage. I mean, the memory bus is a little bit wider at 192 bits versus 160 bits, I believe. We're talking about maybe 68 CUs versus 52 CUs, roughly in that ballpark, according to the latest leaks. So you do some extrapolation of that. Maybe you say it's like 20%, 25% faster. I think historically speaking, 20% faster is not going to get you a whole lot. It's basically not that meaningful. And especially if you're looking at like an unsubsidized box on the one end, subsidized box on the other end, there could be a substantial price premium that you're paying for that additional performance. Because the new Xbox Magnus die is like also over 400 millimeters squared, even though it is, I think, a dual die design. That is a considerably large die for a console, whereas PS6 seems to be a die that's like around PS5 Pro size. It's a fairly svelte die and it's monolithic, so that should be cheaper to produce just by its nature as well. I would completely agree with Alex that it mostly comes down, or could largely come down, to having features that PS6 doesn't have, because Sony is known for stripping things out, not including parts of the RDNA design that they don't feel like they need. For instance, the Xbox Series had much better machine learning acceleration in multiple formats than PS5. And there was some talk initially and some demos of Microsoft showing off early machine learning upscalers, think like single frame upscalers, things like this. Nothing ever came of that, but they could have probably shipped something at least based off the provenance of XeSS on similar hardware on PC. Presumably they could have shipped something. So maybe, given that this is a PC, given that it has access to those technologies, perhaps it could make more of a difference this time. But I don't know exactly what they would be accelerating that Sony wouldn't. That's very dependent on that. But also I would say that with the push to HDMI 2.2, I think both these boxes will support HDMI 2.2, but with much more of a focus on monitors and configurability on the Xbox Helix side. I think that could lead to some really interesting outcomes where you are getting like 240 hertz, maybe even 480 hertz gaming using DSC, using HDMI 2.2, using, I don't think they would be using Ultra 96, maybe Ultra 64 HDMI 2.2. Focusing on that, I think that could be a big plus for high frame rate gaming, because I actually don't expect Sony to necessarily be shipping like super high frame rate modes on PS6 rather, at least out of the gate, because televisions, I don't think, will have support for the full HDMI 2.2 Ultra 96 spec, and I suspect that Sony will be shipping a display controller that's not capable of the full Ultra 96 HDMI 2.2 spec. So I think that will be a difference, maybe more in use, but also on the PlayStation side. I actually don't think you're going to have a lot of ultra high frame rate modes, even if the system supports it, just because it will be such a minority of televisions, at least at the time of release.
That's smart.
Okay. Yeah, that's pretty comprehensive answer there. But I think fundamentally, if you're looking at a machine that has got a kind of like a smaller but more focused user base compared to like a mainstream console, like we assume the PlayStation 6 is going to be, kind of makes sense really that it would be sort of targeting more quote unquote sort of exotic scenarios that are more in the realm of PC gaming. And to be frank, if I'm going to be buying an Xbox Helix device, I want it to have all of that stuff. If I'm a PC gamer, if I'm buying that in favor of a pre-built PC, for example, I don't really want to be giving up features, although I saw NVIDIA's like apparently their market share is up to 95% now of graphics. So I think that's basically that feature set is what Microsoft is going to be up against if they are targeting that market. Okay, let's move on to the next question. Okay, so this question comes from Dudley the Gentleman. Hi, DF team. Thinking about the topic of Sony moving away from PC ports of first-party games, what will the role of Nixxes be going forward? Relegating them to a mere support studio doesn't seem like a great return on investment. On a semi-related note, do you find it disappointing that the Demon's Souls remake/remaster was never ported to PC, a platform that already has a huge Souls fan base? Well, I think, on the latter question, yes, because that was always a bit strange, wasn't it, that you couldn't get the Demon's Souls remake/remaster on PC in an era where Sony were supporting PC ports of its first-party AAA single-player games. So that I think we were pretty much accepting that isn't a particularly great state of affairs. But Alex, Nixxes, the future. No AAA single-player games apparently coming.
Well, that's I wasn't here for any of the directs where that was really discussed ever. I think it's just a shame for Nixxes in that case, because they've done non-PC ports, of course, before, and we've discussed a number of them over the decade, but I think what they were really interested in themselves as a studio was the PC porting process. So them not doing that seems like a bit of a shame for the people working there, potentially. I think making them into a support studio, they don't have Bluepoint as a support studio anymore, so someone's got to come in and fill that role. So it could be next season they're technically adept people, so they can probably do anything they put their mind to in those regards, and hopefully they get more time. I feel like they didn't ever get enough time for some of their PC ports, actually, hence some of the launch quality issues. I think that's really what it's going to be for them. The whole PC port situation for Sony is a bit weird. I feel like they sometimes committed not enough or expected too much of like late ports that were expensive, maybe with so much shoddy quality on launch at times. So them kind of being like, I'm always reminded of that. We've tried everything, but we've tried nothing, but everything isn't working, or a thing from The Simpsons. That's what I do get a little bit of right here. I always thought that PC and console were very separate audiences, just in terms of desires and tastes, and also just like expectations of what a game should do and can do. So them feeling maybe that it was threatening their platform, I don't know if it always made sense to me, but maybe that's one of the reasons why they are doing it. And I don't understand why Demon Souls wasn't ported to PC, much like I don't understand why Gran Turismo wasn't, because the PC sim racing audience is also huge. And I don't know. Maybe it just didn't play into the idea of, since Demon Souls was a one and done kind of thing, and there wasn't going to be another Demon Souls anytime soon, maybe it didn't play into the idea of, we want to entice PC players into franchises on the PlayStation side. Maybe that's the reason why. But yeah, it seems like it would have been perfect for it, and it might have sold even more than it would have on PlayStation, just because the Souls audience is ridiculous on PC. That's like where all the crazy mods are and just the weirdness. So yeah, I don't know why.
Yeah, they did Sackboy. They did a port of Sackboy to the PC, but they didn't do a port of Demon Souls. Somebody's got to explain that one to me. I guess the port would have been quite easy for Sackboy, owing to its Unreal Engine nature.
Right.
But even so, strategically, it was just sort of completely baffling. On the Nixxes side of things, they are geographically very close to Guerrilla Games, which I think has helped them in the past in terms of collaboration and stuff like that. It definitely helps when you're in the same time zone. And, I wonder whether the future is that they will end up as a kind of Guerrilla Games offshoot, whether the Nixxes name remains, who knows. I think it's a real shame, though, that, they were brought in to do a specific task, and, that task is no longer available to them. On the flip side, as you noted earlier, Alex, Nixxes aren't just a one-trick pony. They are very, very good at everything they do, and they have done a lot of console work before. So hopefully we're not going to be looking at another Blue Point situation. I don't know what you think there, Oliver.
Yeah, geez. Hopefully it's not another Blue Point situation. I agree. But they are integrated into some upcoming projects. They're a support studio on Ceros, or actually maybe even a little bit more than that, because I'm reading here that they're co-developing and helping with art and game design. So that sounds like a substantial remit on that project. I imagine they could also provide technical help across Sony titles. They have a lot of expertise there. So, who knows what they'll be doing in the future, but I expect that a studio with that level of talent could be integrated and could be helpful across a wide spectrum of Sony games. And I also don't expect that the Sony porting pipeline is totally dead. Like, there are going to be some multiplayer titles. Maybe they can help with the, Horizon Hunters Gathering game that Guerrilla is working on. Maybe they're getting that PC version up and running or something along those lines. On the Demon Souls thing here, it is disappointing that it was never ported to PC, but it does have a very good PS5 Pro version, and that PS5 Pro version in very short order is going to get an upgrade to PSSR 2. It's going to get an upgrade to the upgraded PSSR in Sony's nomenclature. Maybe I'm too much of a console partisan, but that's not too bad to me. It's like pretty good 4K 60 imagery.
It lives on.
It lives on, and it's a good version, and I don't think anyone would really be disappointed by it. Now, no, it's not running at like 240 frames per second with like DLSS 4.5 and 6x FG, whatever. I don't know, all this nonsense that's going on PC at the moment with ultra high frame rates and your OLED monitors and such. But for most people, I think a 4K 60 experience with that level of visual quality, that level of like incredible graphical fidelity is something to be appreciated regardless of what platform it may or may not be on.
Mm-hmm. Okay, brilliant. Let's move on. I got this question here from Avi. A number of outfits are reporting that Sony/PlayStation Store is testing dynamic pricing for games. What's your take on this development? Well, my take's pretty straightforward. I mean, obviously there is a degree of flexibility in terms of pricing on a digital platform, right? And you'd expect to see stuff like sales and whatnot. How dynamic is the pricing is my question. Now, I'm looking at this report, and it does seem to be quite interesting what they're doing. It seems to be like dynamic discounts, but obviously dynamic discounts means that other people are paying more. But at the same time, across regions, there's always been some degree of price disparity. I think the concept, though, if it is truly dynamic pricing, if you're thinking of dynamic pricing in the same way as like dynamic pricing on Uber or whatnot, that generally tends to happen, I think, according to supply and demand. And basically the problem with the digital platform is there's infinite supply. So yes. How does that work? Oliver?
I'm really not a fan of this. I don't like it. Like you mentioned, the constraints that lead, like demand and supply that lead to other kind of dynamic pricing systems, don't exist here. And in this instance, critically, if I want to buy a PS5 game, unless I'm buying physical, I only have one option for digital, right? I only have the PlayStation Store as an option for digital. I can't cross shop between different vendors and theoretically get a better deal. So I think it's even more dangerous in that situation. And for me, I mean, I'm a, so to speak, in gaming parlance, I'm a bit of a whale. I buy a lot of games. I have like 400 odd Switch games. I have, 400 odd PlayStation games, 300, 400 odd, lots of Xbox games. I have a lot of games across all these platforms that I've amassed over the past, 10 years or something of the, predominance in digital marketplaces over the past, over 8th gen consoles and 9th gen consoles now. And I can just imagine like, I would have paid a lot more for some of these games, like Fast Fusion cost like $20, $25. I would have paid like $100 for Fast Fusion. But is that, am I getting into a situation where they would start charging me the price that I would actually pay for that title? That seems like a dangerous situation to be in because I'm not as price sensitive maybe for some of these games. So I just don't like it in general. And it kind of seems to almost get into the realm of like maybe penalizing your most dedicated, most enthusiastic users. And that's just a dangerous route to go down. So I hope it's just an experiment with dynamic pricing. I'm fine if like in this trial, they are just lowering prices a little bit here and there. It's not the most offensive thing in the world, but I think like the end point of dynamic pricing is something that's actually quite hostile to a lot of their user base. So I wouldn't want it to go in that direction.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Alex?
Well, to recall, in an earnings call on Thursday, this is quoting CNBC article about Sony's profits at the beginning of the year from February. A Sony executive said the company aims to blunt the impact of higher memory costs by focusing on monetizing its current install base. And further expanding its software and network service revenue. Well, that sounds kind of like one of the first pushes in this direction. And as Oliver said, you are kind of tied to the box and the store that is on it. So unless you're buying physical, in which case this is just part of the experience. So yeah, it sucks.
Yeah, I think if there is going to be any sort of kind of exploitation of the user base by any particular digital store, there is going to be pushback, certainly from the European Union, who doesn't take kindly to that sort of thing.
No.
Ultimately, something costs a set price and you can either pay it or you can't. I don't understand why things need to be dynamic in that nature, unless it is to maximize revenues and profits. Okay, let's move on to the next question. This one comes from The Adam. And spoilers, Alex, you have no interest in this question whatsoever.
Oh, yay.
You can just go get a coffee if you want. Hi DF crew, exclamation point. Coincidence or intentional? The new Pokemon game is finally showing improved graphics and actually has very pretty water effects. Oh, Alex, you're back in. With waves and decent physics. And then John releases a retro water episode. What are your thoughts on the Pokemon footage shown so far? Thanks as always and see you soon, exclamation point. Oliver.
I think it looks quite attractive. I think it is based off some fork of Unreal Engine 4. And it does look quite pretty here. It looks like, it looks a world above what they were previously shipping on Switch with the Legends game and with the other titles they were shipping. There were some pretty miserable efforts there. But yeah, it looks, you got beautiful looking water. I think you've got screen space reflections. Very attractive title relative to those prior games at least. So I would say that it's almost like a Pokemon Black Flag kind of game. It just gives me that kind of vibe here. So yeah, I think it doesn't look exceptional. And it is running at 30 FPS on what is presumably Switch 2 footage. But it looks like a competently assembled game with like good looking art by and large. It looks decent, has good lighting. It's just a complete step above the other Pokemon efforts that I derided so poorly back when they shipped. So I'm looking forward to this from a technical perspective. It seems like a title that could actually be like a really genuinely competent 3D Pokemon game, which I honestly can't really say for very many of 3D Pokemon games in recent years.
Mm-hmm.
Do you have any input at all, Alex, or should we just...
Well, no, I think I like to say about this that it does remind me of, Assassin's Creed Black Flag. And I imagine if it is an Unreal Engine 4 thing, the one thing with the Pokemon Studio is one of the reasons why their games have been so ugly, I think, is because they have very fast turnaround time. Like they're just like constantly pumping out Pokemon games. There isn't a lot of time to sit back and like reevaluate the technical situation and then push from there and like maybe start with something fresh. And using an off-the-shelf engine like Unreal Engine 4 will have the benefit here is one, its standard features I can see the standard Unreal Engine lens flare here, which is a bit annoying, but things like there's tons of plugins to Unreal that have been developed over the years that have, they're probably very price effective. And I'm pretty sure those waves are probably going to be a plugin. So yeah, there's stuff like that is, I'm happy to see in this game. Cause I did think like all the coverage of the last couple Pokemon games, especially in those cities where like they have just like the tiled textures for the windows. Like, yeah, this is like way better. And it's also visually like, I don't know. I have some level of nostalgia for like red, blue, and yellow. And here, I always thought like, oh, it's fun to be walking around in, like exotic locales. And this finally looks like an exotic locale. So this is cool.
Okay. Let's move swiftly on to this question from Marcus. Maybe something of an Oliver question, but my family is quite bullish on 5K. My dad bought the first 5K screen for consumers, which was the old iMac, and then he bought the Studio Display, and now we have ordered the Studio Display XDR. I'm really curious about the upcoming 5K gaming branded monitors, and I did some benchmarking on the Studio Display using my 4090 powered PC. By fiddling with internal resolution settings, you can get a very good experience, and the high PPI generally hides upscaling artifacts really well. Do you think that 5K gaming has a place in the market? Are you planning on picking up any of the new Apple products? Hope you have a great week. Oliver, this is an Oliver question, and I think in terms of the final bit, it's a yes from you, isn't it?
Yes, it is a yes from me, and I'll get to that in a moment. But I've been looking forward to these monitors for a very long time, these 5K high refresh monitors with tons of dimming zones, because LG and MSI announced two monitors that are, I think, based in the same panel as the Apple monitor, and they displayed them at CES. They have 27-inch 16:9 panels, 5,100 20 by 2880 resolution and refresh rates of 120 hertz or above, and 2,304 dimming zones. That's kind of the shared spec across all these models. And yeah, I've been looking forward to them. I have a Studio Display, a 4-year-old Studio Display sitting in front of me here, but it is kind of a dated panel. It's 60 hertz only. It's not mini LED. It has 1,500 to 1 contrast ratio, maybe. It's got quite gray blacks. It's a good monitor for what it is, but it's not really a high precision monitor. It can't do HDR, can't do the kinds of content that I really want to see on it. And obviously it has that laggy 60 hertz refresh rate. So I have pre-ordered, and I am picking up one on Wednesday. Maybe when this episode goes out, I'll already have it. But I am ordering the Apple Studio Display XDR. I have pre-ordered the Apple Studio Display XDR, which should be basically a drop-in replacement for this display. Unfortunately, I can only drive it at 60 hertz with my M1 Ultra because it's using an older Thunderbolt spec. I think it doesn't support like DSC over its DisplayPort or whatever, something along these lines. So I can only run it at 60 hertz. So I'll have to upgrade that at some point as well this year. Maybe when they reveal the M5 Ultra Mac Studios, I'll be in on that. But yeah, I'm really looking forward to this. I think its primary use, though, at least in my mind, is for productivity. Because for productivity work, at least for me, I don't know about you guys, but I tend to sit a little bit closer to the monitor, and I tend to put my eyes specifically on different parts of the screen and focus on specific parts of the screen. So I feel like that additional density I get on this monitor, above a 4K monitor, really benefits me there. Whereas I feel like with gaming, I'm sitting back a little bit further. I'm taking in larger portions of the screen. I'm trying to be immersed in the experience, but also I need to be able to see things in my peripheral, especially in like a fast action game. I'm not focusing so much on minute details. I'm not moving in to see things on the display, or at least that's what I tend to do on my productivity displays. So I feel like that's a bit of a different use case. But I do think that high-end GPUs are perfectly capable of driving 5K displays these days at high refreshes. If we're talking about, DLSS with frame generation, high-end GPUs, I mean, upscaling to 5K has a considerable cost, especially with the 4.5 models. But I think in general, it's a pretty addressable experience. I mean, we've had 5K displays for a long time, as this user points out. I mean, the first Macs with 5K displays were released 11 or 12 years ago. So this is not a new problem, but certainly the GPUs of that era were not really capable of addressing a 5K display in anything but like very light World of Warcraft content or something. Nowadays, I think you can actually get a pretty good gaming experience. Would you want to? I think these are more productivity displays than they are gaming displays, but I think they could work well for gaming as kind of a dual use for sure. And indeed, the MSI and LG, I think they have 330 hertz modes as well that dip down to 1440p. So if you want that super high refresh experience, you can do that as well.
Interesting. I don't know, Alex. I'm kind of thinking certainly in the PC space, 4K at 165 hertz or higher is higher up on my particular priority list than 5K at 120. What do you think?
For gaming, for sure. Just because, you're going to want to, if you're going to be already going for that 4K splurge, which I don't think everyone needs. I think 1440p is an amazing resolution to play at. So most people should probably target that. And it's also much better on your budget to target that from the GPU side. But if you're targeting stuff at 4K and you want to play the latest and greatest experiences, I do think really 4K is the place to stay, because stuff like path tracing is expensive. Upping that base resolution even higher. I mean, arguably at that point with pixel density, maybe you're seeing upscaling issues less if you're going for a higher scale there. So I don't know, it'd be an interesting thing to test out, but I really do think, like Oliver said, 5K productivity. I like the idea of having a monitor where a 4K video preview is just only a part of the monitor and not the whole thing. That is kind of cool. That's why 8K is interesting, but for everything else, not interesting. So yeah, that's kind of how I feel.
It is great in Final Cut how you can have like a pretty decent slice of the screen showing a video and have that actually almost represent the full pixel width that you get in 4K. Right. It actually looks really good. So that's definitely a big advantage. But yeah, for gaming, I mean, 4K is already so many pixels. It's like 8.3 million pixels. We're playing with really high resolutions these days, like 5K, 6K, 8K. These things are kind of a real extravagance for gaming. I'd argue 4K in many cases is an extravagance for gaming. And I'm really comfortable with 4K. So for me, if I was just getting something for gaming, I would not splurge for 5K. I would be going with like probably a 4K mini LED instead of a 5K mini LED personally.
Mm-hmm. Okay, good stuff. Let's move on. Okay, so another question here, and it's Dudley the Gentleman again. He's come up trumps with another interesting question. Hello, yes, Rich Foundry, exclamation point. With Sony likely releasing a PS6 handheld along with a standard console, do any of you see any potential reasoning where Sony would want to release a PlayStation 6 Pro with the current generation's increased silicon costs even before the RAM apocalypse and the push for 8K televisions going the way of the dodo? I originally thought there would be no reason for a PS5 Pro. To my surprise, Sony still released a PS5 Pro. My quick take on that would basically be it all really depends on the trajectory of gaming technology and the extent to which it might make a difference. I think there was probably a good reason to do a PS5 Pro in that obviously the direction of travel was towards better ray tracing and towards machine learning. And although, it's not exactly a huge revelatory change, you are seeing some interesting stuff on the PS5 Pro, particularly now the new PSSR is incoming. So the promise is kind of like finally being reached there. The question is the extent, what happens next? Let's say that RDNA 5 is really, really cool and does everything that NVIDIA is kind of currently doing. Well, the obvious question is, what is NVIDIA doing next, and to what extent will it be game-changing, and to what extent would it actually justify a PS6 Pro? Alex, what do you think?
I don't know. I don't know at this moment in time what would be game-changing. I guess to address the deficiencies in whatever the PS6 design is going to be, kind of like the way the PS5 Pro works, like RDNA 2 and, lack of machine learning and lack of good enough RT for certain experiences. That's kind of what the PS5 Pro slots into. And I guess we would have to wait for the PS6 to come out to see where its larger deficiencies are, to see where then Sony thinks they can, produce a product which generates enough FOMO to get enthusiasts to buy for the perceived deficiencies of the original system. In that case, I think it's really hard to say at the moment, though. Given the how expensive everything is, I also think it would be a bit weird to, release a PS6 Pro. But I was also slightly surprised by PS5 Pro. I didn't really see the need for it for a long time. So, yeah.
I think we all didn't really see any need for an enhanced console this particular generation because there's still the sense that we're only just at the beginning of the generation because of the extent of the cross-generation period. But I think PS5 Pro, particularly with the new PSSR, is kind of like it has addressed certain deficiencies or will address, hopefully. Oliver?
Yeah, I mean, geez. If the PS5 is great for raster, PS5 Pro is great for ray tracing, PS6 presumably great for path tracing, then what is PS6 Pro great for? I think they need to find something to differentiate themselves. Likewise with PS4, great for 1080p. PS4 Pro, great or good, maybe not great, for 4K. There's going to be something in there. And I kind of think, is it more path tracing? Is it 8K rendering? Is it something crazy with AI and neural stuff and what's going on there? But I kind of think that could be part of it. If there is some new rendering paradigm, if there is something new that they need to attach themselves to, that could be a big part of it. But I also tend to just think that maybe the role for a PS6 Pro is not so well sketched out next generation, because what we're seeing is a much more direction of travel towards homogenization of visual experiences, towards actually extending to the low end, delivering a PS6 handheld that presumably is going to be capable of ray tracing, is going to maybe be even capable of some light path tracing experiences, is going to be an okay box to tackle a lot of these more extreme experiences, but at a lower fidelity level. We're seeing a lot of games shipping now on Switch 2. Resident Evil Requiem scales all the way from Switch 2 all the way up to a 5090 equipped PC with some grace there, no pun intended. That does need to happen here, right? So I kind of feel like maybe the PS6 Pro isn't the right segment of the market to be thinking about. Maybe it's really that PS6 handheld that we should be thinking about a bit more.
Yeah, certainly from a mainstream perspective, I agree 100% there. It's a different way to actually play games, really. That's why Switch and Switch 2 have been so successful, I think. Okay, interesting stuff. I think the other thing, of course, is that Sony have actually made use of all of the major process node jumps. So PS5 Pro has been 4 nanometer, and it's okay, well, we can do something with this, and here it is. And so where do we go? I think it's 3 nanometer for the PS6. Obviously, 2 nanometer is still a thing. I guess the extent to which it's different and could provide an improved gaming experience will also be sort of front of mind for Sony as well. Okay, let's move on to the final question. Leftist Hominid asks, how is Will doing? When will he be allowed back on DF Direct? So this is great news, which we announced last week on social media and on our support program, that Will Judd is returning to Digital Foundry. Obviously there are some pretty bad things happening at IGN. I'm kind of done talking about IGN at this point. In fact, we actually recorded a segment about the layoffs of IGN related to Eurogamer, and I just thought, do we need to go into depth on this? Let's talk about the positive thing. The positive thing is that Will Judd is returning to Digital Foundry starting at the beginning of April. He's going to be taking point on our website. I'm going to be working alongside him on that. Very, very excited. Merch is going to be back. We're going to be doing some good new merch. I think I really do want a Digital Foundry version of this.
The tall mug.
Honest. This gigantic mug. It's seen me through many, many early morning DF Directs. For the requisite caffeine boost. So a lot going on there. Can't wait to be working with Will again, and all of the team are super, super excited about that. Right, Alex?
Yeah. I posted about it on the Reddit. Also, one thing that we did a handful of times, I believe, with Will was doing old PC play with our Discord community. And actually now there's even more reasons to do it. We got stuff like Unreal Tournament 2K4 being re-released on PC and is now community driven. And it's going to have stuff like, I think active Linux ports, active Mac ports, active new features for that PC version, bug quashing under Windows 11 and higher. So those are things I would love to play with Will, because Will is an old PC guy and it's really fun. He also loves Homeworld, which I love, So maybe we play a game of Homeworld and I get ripped to shreds. So that'd be good.
Yeah, so we've got a new plan for the website, which you're going to be actioning with Will and our partners at Hookshot, which I'm very, very excited about, being kind of old school journalist. And yes, the merch is going to come back, hopefully in bigger and better than we have before. Excited about that. And just the bottom line of having another PC orientated guy on board, super, super good for us. And happy days ahead. Oliver.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to Will coming back, looking forward to shipping half-finished video scripts in the middle of the night for Will to peruse and revise as he sees fit. But yeah, it's fun to work with Will. Easy, no drama to work with. I'm really excited to working with him again. And it is nice that out of the ashes of some of the unfortunate firings that have occurred at Ziff Davis, we are getting some valuable contributors back.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, there's a lot of people affected by that. And ultimately, this is why we went independent, right? And I think from an audience perspective, it's basically, who do you want running your favorite media outlets? Is it people that are like fully invested in what we do and love what we do, which is the case that now with the ownership structure of Digital Foundry? Or is it kind of like, guys that are sort of at the top of the tree, massive media conglomerates? So that's the importance of independent media. It's gaining momentum for obvious reasons. And, I'd just like to say thanks for supporting Digital Foundry and consider supporting other independents out there, because we kind of need it. But that was the final question, therefore the end of the show. Oh, but actually, before we do that, Leftist Hominid, when will be allowed back on DF Direct? Well, soon, hopefully. Didn't actually answer that question. Anyway, that was the end of the show. So please do like, subscribe, share on the off chance you enjoyed it. Ring bells for notifications to you when DF drops new content. Potential algorithmic boosts for us. But yes, patreon.com/Digital Foundry, supporting independent media. It really is important. Store.digitalfoundry.net to examine our range of merchandising wares. But that's all from us on this one. Thanks for watching and supporting Digital Foundry, and we'll see you very, very soon.